Welcome to the ULI podcast series, recorded live at the Sea Change Summit in Barcelona, where we speak with our members, leaders at the forefront of decarbonisation and sustainability. In each episode, we dive into innovative solutions, explore challenges, and share insights that are shaping the future of our cities, industries, and communities. Join us as Xavier, Managing Director at Catella, dives into the decarbonisation challenge in the residential market, tackling affordability, funding, and the industry's fragmented value chain. He shares his vision for greater integration and self-regulation, highlighting how transition risks and clear standards can accelerate progress. Xavier emphasises the urgency of action, balancing decarbonisation with GDP growth, and sees hope in industry leaders uniting to drive change. For him, the Sea Change Summit is about being on the front lines of transformation, because the real question is, what happens if we don't act fast enough?
I'm here with Xavier, who is Managing Director of Catella. Could you tell me a little bit how your organisation is approaching decarbonisation, sort of within the wider real estate industry?
Well, our portfolio focuses mostly on the residential part of the built environment, which means that you're actually dealing with the biggest asset class, because that's simply where most of the assets and capital is allocated to. But at the same time, you're also faced with tenants that, on average, will earn average salaries. And so there's think different to some other segments where there's a bigger distinction on where the investment market sits in terms of prime assets, with prime tenants, and let's say higher cash flows. We are actually in an environment where we deal with people that have mostly, not only, but mostly low to middle income incomes, basically. So households that have those incomes. So yeah, that puts this context of transition around the question, how can you actually decarb in a way that you can fund it, which is what most of our colleagues also have, but in a way that is affordable. So it's like a third angle to it, because the question of affordability, of course, is very important, specifically if you know that housing markets are relatively broken in Europe already for like 20 years, in terms that there is already a question of housing affordability. So then on top of that, you get questions around climate change, decarbonization, physical asset risk. Yeah, there is this dominant question of how are we going to pay for all of this and keep it within a socially acceptable kind of bandwidth.
How do you go about in engaging with the residents across your assets, I suppose, to help? Because I assume it would be a bit of a partnership with the people living in the buildings that you invest in. And
I think not enough. I think we come from an industry whereby there is such a lack of housing that the dialogue with your tenants has been structurally quite limited, because you can rent out your apartments, right? Then on top of that, we actually split up the industry in different parts of the value chain, whereby we are an end investor, or we are an investment manager. We have end investors or pension fund clients. But when we don't have frontline facing colleagues of mine talking to the tenants, because those are the property managers that deal with that. So we are an industry that largely is relatively remote from the tenants. So there's not that much of a discussion. But we are improving, and also we are improving. So we do tenant surveys, obviously. We obviously have professional communication towards our tenants in terms of this is the regulation that will change, this is rent increase that we can do for next year. And this is based on also investments that we do in terms of energy efficiency, because if tenants save money because of the energy costs going down, we incorporate that. So obviously there is a professional communication going on, but I think we, perhaps also the industry at large, can improve a lot on that, and perhaps also rethink the value chain in a way that is a little bit more integrated than it has been over the last decade.
Do you think the relationship and how you work with property managers is a barrier to decarbonisation as it currently stands?
No, not necessarily a big barrier, because you can organize your way around it. You just have to organize a change management program with external parties, and you can argue that it might be more efficient if everything is integrated, that there is less communication loss, less therefore inefficiencies or less costs, and if we all need to mind costs, then that is perhaps a better way of doing it. So there are perhaps better ways of doing it, but it's not one of the main barriers, I think, for sure.
What are the main barriers?
For that. Well, I think that the main barrier is perhaps that there is no clear evidence yet for investors, capital allocators, that there is a first mover advantage.
Okay.
If you do better than the rest. And doing better means that you, in this context, that you think about what we call dual materiality, which is, I'm going to give you as an investor a financial return, but on top of that, you get an environmental and a social return. So we look at different components of a return. And I think in itself, it's a much more meaningful and also future-proof concept of return.
Yeah.
But over the last couple of years, I think there's very little evidence that those companies that have been pushing that forward have had the benefit of being a first mover. And that partly relates to the fact that there are really systemic barriers in the way that the market operates. And one obvious one is valuations. And so if we have buildings that are energy positive, and for us that means that the building generates on site more green energy than the building and all its tenants and all their usage consume in grey energy on a yearly basis. So on a yearly basis it's positive. And it's as a standard price of construction compared to the building next door. So you would think, well, wait a minute, if we have a building that's a little bit unusual and more future-proof than the building next door, you would expect that the valuer would say, we should actually push the value a little bit higher of this building because perhaps it's more liquid and you can sell it easier. So there's less risk, right? So that should push the price up. Or would you say, well, perhaps there is some cash hidden reserve because there's more rental potential in this type of building. If the energy cost for those buildings, the energy cost of the tenants, if they behave well, is zero or negative, to even get money back.
Yeah,
right?
you'd think that would drive the
So you would think that but there's so far there is no
it's not feeding through.
proof of that. There is no, it's not been feeding through. So yeah, I think investors that move first have not yet had the reward that they deserve.
Do you think it's a matter of time as the industry sort of transitions to value assets that are better prepared for the physical risks of climate change?
I do think it's a matter of time, but on the long run, everyone will be dead. So I hope it's not that long, and I don't think it will be like the very long term. That you will get some more kind of valuation or investment justice coming back in. But the industry very much lives in the moment. Yeah. So you allocate your capital, based on what you at the end of the year have kind of analyzed in terms of your investment capacity, and then you look at returns, mostly financial, and then many markets in the last couple of years have been hit by a repricing downwards. And so the risk-free rate has been reset, so it's gone up. So actually returns on real estate need to go up. And that has kind of put more pressure on everything that is E&S because the returns are under pressure. And then you see that under those circumstances, most investors, by far, overprivilege again the short-term financial return.
Do you think the transition risks, increasing transition risks, will encourage investors to move faster? For example, regulatory pressures or the risk of stranded assets, for example. Do you think as those risks increase, the investment market might evolve?
Well, I think what generally happened, if you think about, it's not a completely correct analogy, but if you think about the global financial crisis. So at that point, we realized that being over leveraged could kill you. And at that point, the regulator came in and massively changed the industry. In Europe, we had the AIFMD regulation that most in the market know now obviously quite well. That came out of nowhere, and the industry was badly prepared to deal with the European Commission and discuss on those topics. So actually the European Commission at that point was quite friendly to the investment universe and was very open to listen what the industry wanted. And now there is perhaps an analogy because it's not over leveraged but over carbonized that can kill you.
Yeah.
Right? And the industry just keeps moving on until there's some kind of systemic crisis point if we don't kind of regulate ourselves. And I think part of the discussion so far is perhaps we are not regulating ourselves quickly enough, that this crisis moment can come. And then what happens, the regulator sets in.
Yeah.
And then starts to push kind of regulation, obligatory regulations for everyone. And then still hopefully the work that we're doing now within Sea Change is very useful because we have templates, we have thought about certain elements. In that sense, we may be better prepared than we were in the terms of the global financial crisis. But it's an answer to this question is, do you have a first mover advantage, yes or not? If the industry at large thinks that you do not have an advantage for most of the assets investment classes that we have. So perhaps excluding some prime offices in Barcelona or Dublin or other places, then not a lot will happen. And if science is correct, that means that our troubles will get bigger. And that most likely would probably mean at some point a higher government intervention. And that will then set in, but will reset the market for everyone in the same way, right? So I think that silently many participants in the industry are perhaps preparing a little bit for that and saying, let the others go, and at some point the state has to solve it, because that's always easy to say, someone else.
Well, a subject that's addressed quite at the Sea Change Summit here is carbon pricing and whether a standardised approach, the benefits and the challenges of that. I mean, is that something you think that could help move everything forward?
That's a good example, because there are two ways. We are now proposing an internal carbon pricing, which means it's internal, it's only for us, right? It's inside a fund, and the fund agrees to apply it with their investors. It's not regulated, it's not a push of regulation. It's something that the industry proposes to do. And I think it's very sensible. And if you do it, there are two ways of doing it. Perhaps the best way is to put really aside a little bit of money. So really tax the fund in a way so that you can invest that money really physically in doing something good within your portfolio. So I think all of that makes sense. But if there is no real first mover advantage to do that ultimately, then we may end up in the same way that the regulator will come and say, we will now push that through. So you are obliged to do that. And some have done that already. So we had an example of the city of Milan that actually pushes through regulation. So there's carbon tax not internally pushed, but externally pushed. And I think that is, again, kind of the same discussion, that you can end up in a situation where that will happen. You will probably still be a little bit better off in terms of preparing your organization, people knowing the concepts, working it through with the accounting and the regulation, everything, if you've done it before. But it's a lot of work if it doesn't move really the needle. I still think you need to do it, by the way. But
so are you at the Sea Change Summit? Are you hearing conversations talking about this? Is it a big subject? How to get the industry moving? I suppose if in these circumstances.
No, I think that is perhaps the key theme at this point, because there has been a lot of work done, and I think on the topics, if I listen then on questions that are being raised as to what is the concern of industry leaders and decision makers in terms of implementing, and perhaps the disconnect between what we have done within Sea Change and ULI and then the way that it has been implemented, that there is disconnect is perhaps a little bit of a too strong word, but you would like to have more grip on change, right? Change, of course, is extremely difficult, but I think we're either optimists or naive, but we would want to have a little bit more grip
it up a little bit.
and a little bit more speed into that. And then the question is, we're not seeing that to the extent that most of us would hope that that would have happened. And is it that we took the wrong topics? Well, no, I don't think so. If I listen correctly, then I'm picking up that the valuations are really important, because in a way the valuations are an answer to the question of, hey, what's my first move advantage? If you do everything well, but you're not rewarded in a way that is financial, which is still obviously the dominant language of an investment management industry, then so working on valuations and the preserve tool and everything that comes with that is really really important. And then the other one, which clearly comes out as well, although I must admit to my surprise a little bit, is that work on standards.
Okay.
So there are too many standards, and that, of course, I agree. That's you don't know what is your guiding star anymore if there are like 6 or 7 standards, and you want to make an investment decision, and you get a paper from your German colleague, but you have to report in a European standard, and that doesn't help, right? So I understand it's an unnecessary hassle, but it's kind of promoted to the level 1 kind of concern that inhibits progress, is that too many standards. And actually today, I think a very important step has been made, because ULI, APRA, NREF, and 3 other organizations decided on a single standard, or not a standard, a single principle, set of principles that you can use to apply carbon tax to your portfolio. Well, and those are the leading organizations in our industry. So if they can come together, that should really be helpful. So actually we're working on the 2 main topics, which is valuation and then standards.
Thank you for joining us in this insightful conversation. It's clear that tackling decarbonisation and driving sustainable change requires collaboration, innovation, and a unified vision. Together we can learn from diverse perspectives, share best practices, and take actionable steps towards a more resilient and sustainable future. Stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to explore how leaders across the industry are shaping the path forward.